I tell you what, it's not like the olden days. I'm Jake.
I'm Rosie.
And this is our 21st Century Children's Game Shows special. On our 2023 update podcast, which also served as a kind of welcome back after our break to move house that we had in the second half of 2022, I mentioned that it was, at that stage, at the beginning of 2023, 10 years since CITV's Old School Weekend, which we'd referenced on our early podcasts as being so recent. But of course that happened in January 2013 to celebrate 30 years of children's ITV. There is speculation somewhere on previous episodes of this podcast, what will CITV do for 40 years in January 2023? It ended up being nothing, and the main thing that CITV did in 2023 at all was stop broadcasting in September. Of course, it had been reduced to digital CITV channel only, and they were showing a lot of absolute rubbish. But it's a sobering moment, the actual death of CITV after 40 years and 9 months. One of the very last things they did in 2022, I think, was actually make a second series of that How 3, or just How as it was called, which we were wondering on our Art Attack and How 2 podcast if they were going to do. And yes, they actually did make that second series, again with Fred Dinage bringing some class to it, remotely from his own home. But they're certainly not going to make a third series of that because CITV is no more. But another thing CITV made latterly, when they were hardly making anything and were about to wind down, was a game show called Don't Unleash the Beast, which they showed throughout the early 2020s until the channel closed down permanently. And during the last few months that the CITV channel was on our preview aerial, I did watch some episodes of Don't Unleash the Beast. There are 2 seasons of it, and it's absolute rubbish, but I did find it quite interesting as a 21st century children's game show because it reminded me of so many other game shows, incorporated aspects of all sorts of things, not done nearly as well as they'd been done in the past. I expect if you asked people just a little younger than us, it would remind them most of Jungle Run. But it also has aspects of another show we're going to talk about today, Raven. Finders Keepers is something I was particularly reminded of in the End Game. The name of the rancid ramp in that End Game reminds me of the Stinky Sink from Terror Towers, though it also has quite a lot in common with the Gunk Dunk from Get Your Own Back. And despite the fact that Don't Unleash the Beast isn't really that good, and we've watched 3 episodes in preparation for this podcast and couldn't really stand to watch any more, I do think it's quite an interesting attempt, 2020's attempt by ITV to make a children's game show, to introduce some interesting world-building backstory, the Hallian people, the Hallian language introduced into the mental games, as it were. Reminds me very much of some of the stupid symbols they used to put up in Raven, which, as I said, we're going to talk about later, in games like Dwarf Mine and Conundrum. Except in the case of the Hallian language, it's kind of neat because it links into the backstory, world building, and kind of makes sense in the whole archaeological setting. What did you think of Don't Unleash the Beast?
I thought it was very much inspired by the types of game shows you mentioned, and it made a laudable effort to have this backstory and world building. But unfortunately, it has all been done better before, and they couldn't really match it. It's like when you've got a stamp that you stamp in some ink and you keep stamping it without re-inking it, it gets weaker each time. I think Don't Unleash the Beast is the last one of those stamps.
Yes, a very apt simile, I think, there. Of course, I've just been reminded that title, Don't Unleash the Beast, is complete nonsense. The beast is always unleashed and is chasing them through the subterranean tunnels of Hallion. Of course, it isn't really. The beast is simply a manifestation of the clock. They say the beast is coming when the game is over. I don't know, perhaps on younger viewers that might work. It might be kind of atmospheric. But I always find it kind of annoying when the professor says, Don't unleash the beast. And speaking of the Professor, he's not exactly a Treguard or a Raven or even a Professor McNulty, is he?
No, I was thinking about how one of the things they've copied is the actor, presenter, character kind of thing, and that hasn't come across nearly as well as Treguard or Raven, or even quite as well as Professor McNulty. I wasn't sure how to say so without being rude to the actor, but it's not really his fault. It's just the way the shows come together isn't quite there.
That's right, he does what they ask him to do, cringy attempts to be funny, and he certainly doesn't do them badly for what they are, and he doesn't interact with the teams badly, even though a lot of the stuff they give him to say and a lot of the banter's kind of directed, if not exactly scripted. But yeah, the actor, Pete Furman, doesn't do anything wrong, doesn't do anything to make the show worse. But also, it is quite interesting to see some of the inspiration, some of those former stamps that have gone into it, and to note that it is the end of a long line of such game shows, of CITV game shows, and of CITV itself. And in many ways, that does make me quite sad, the demise of children's ITV, but it's only a forerunner to the demise of scheduled television in general, which can't be far off. And the modern generation that hasn't been born yet, will never know the joy of coming home on a particular day to watch a favourite show at a particular time. And we've said things very like this, particularly on early podcasts. I remember you saying how special it was to think, ooh, it's Wednesday, I can go home and watch Art Attack or whatever special show it is. Or a big one that many millions of CITV viewers had in the Christmas term. Ooh, it's Friday. Finally, the week at school will be over and I can go home and watch Nightmare. Things will be right with the world, if only for a short time. An unusual trip to the 2020s there for our 21st century specials. We're not going into the teens, we're once again now going back to the noughties, although I suppose when we get on to Raven we will stray into the teens just briefly as a point of interest about the revival. But having said that, I suppose Trapped does technically just sneak into the teens, as it did run in 4 series from 2007 to 2010. And that sort of time, end of the noughties, beginning of the 10s, was when Ed Petrie was doing some very excellent in-vision continuity on the CBBC channel, very much up to the standard of the old broom cupboard, with Andy Crane and Philippa Forrester and people like that, along with, of course, the very latest version of Gordon the Gopher or Ed the Duck, Oucho the Cactus. And Ed and Oucho made a wonderful TV duo, didn't they?
Yes, I remember seeing them introducing Raven when we tuned in to watch that and thinking, my God, this is like the old days. A really, really good, engaging presenter sitting in a sort of cupboardy place with an amusing puppet that's not just stupid. I couldn't believe it.
You thought to yourself, I tell you what, it is like the olden days.
I did.
And they were so good on CBBC that they got their own kind of game show, didn't they? 2 series of Ed and Oucho's Excellent Inventions.
I think that's in the same kind of vein as How to Art Attack type shows, except there were real kids in it taking part, so in that sense it was sort of like a game show.
It's the child of a game show and a children's information show.
And we watched that quite religiously because Ed and Oucho were so funny, and Ed would always talk to himself, often on the phone, as one of the many characters he did. And what they were trying to do was invent, create, make some kind of thing, gadget, that a child had sent in to apply to be on the show. For instance, a quite memorable one is the gardening dragon that was mechanical and would dig with its claws and spit out seeds, spit out water to water them, and then open up a sort of chest cavity and serve hot chocolate that's been in there keeping warm.
Ed, where's my bubble bobbin' robin? Ed, that's my family. Some of the kids who got involved managed to create some fun, memorable moments moments, and Ed and Oucho were always brilliant, of course.
And what would really have happened was that some sort of sciencey brain box person would have worked out how to invent the thing before they even contacted the child and said, "We've chosen you to be on the show." But in the episode, there was a kind of story where Ed and Oucho were finding out what to do, and that was why they had to talk to Ed pretending to be chefs and explorers and things, finding out about the science, making a completely crappy version that didn't work at all, and then a better one that almost worked but something was missing, and finishing up the show with the finished product. And it was all very funny because Ed and Oucho made it work. It was kind of about them as characters as much as it was about inventing this silly thing the child thought of.
And it certainly was edutaining because there was genuine science in there, and Ed and Oucho were extremely entertaining. Trapped was a very good show as well. Definitely falls completely into the category of a children's game show, and I remember coming across it unexpectedly and enjoying it. The blurb on the TV guide described it as taking place in a gothic fairy tale tower, in which 6 unfortunates at a time would play the game, but only one would escape, while the rest remained trapped. And it was quite a good description of it. Gothic fairy tale tower with themed games along those lines. They took it much too far in the end for the final series, the 4th series, which they subtitled Ever After, Trapped Ever After, and went really overboard with the fairy tale stuff to too much of an extent. Perhaps they didn't feel the earlier stuff was gothic fairy tale enough, but really it was.
All the games in Ever After would reference a specific fairy tale. For instance, you had to untie ribbons from the very long hair of someone who reminded you of Rapunzel. Or you had to pull out scrumble nuts from a stack of mattresses on which not the Princess and the Pea but someone like Little Red Riding Hood was sitting at the top, with a wolf in between the mattresses that didn't have the scrumble nuts. Sounds a bit silly when you put it like that.
I remember one thing we objected to, thought was rather unnecessary about Ever After, was that every game had a character in it, even if it didn't really need one. The one exception being that one where they put the apples on the turny thing, which is an over fairy tale adaptation of the one where they stick the plugs in the stinky sewers turny thing. It's the exact same game but redressed to be more fairy tale. But it's still entertaining Ever After. What games do we like from Trapped? Definitely Extraction with the whinging werewolf pulling out the teeth.
Removing things or opening things or picking things and having to get 3 right to win or 3 wrong to lose the game is a classic formula in that show. And yes, Extraction's a brilliant one with this writhing, howling, growling werewolf puppet kind of thing in this dentist's chair with its mouth clamped open and you're pulling out these teeth. Very good fun. I also like, with that format, fairy trials, which is a bit of a strange one, really. You put a little fairy from a shoebox type thing into a machine, which has really got a TV screen on, and you're watching these actresses being different fairies, but ostensibly you're seeing the actual fairy, and you decide whether to release it or blow it up, because it's a good or a bad fairy, based purely on appearance, and it'll be something like the good fairies are wearing gloves, or the bad fairies are smiling, or one or the other of them has red hair. Rather unethical, really, but it's not real, so it's okay.
That's one of those games where they're never going to spot the trick, so the saboteur probably won't be detected in that way. I remember that fairy trials where the saboteur actually has the lever to blow them up or set them free and plays it very cannily. That is a good position to be in as a saboteur. Some games are absolutely horrible for the saboteur. Thinking particularly about true or false questions. If they give you easy questions and you're saying, oh, I think we should go for false, that France is connected to England by the Channel Tunnel. I think it's connected to Algeria. They're going to pick you as a saboteur. I like those questions ones. Phyllis and Madge feed me lies in series 1, and then you get Madame de Visage with her true or false questions in series 2 and 3 with Two-Faced Liar. It's important to have a bit of general knowledge in there, I think, a mix of skills.
I love Phyllis and Madge, but their sort of greenhouse setup and their big bag of seeds. I think it was a shame to replace them with Madame de Visage, really, who makes a bit less sense. Madame de Visage did give some good obscure questions, though, and it did make us laugh when she asked horses cannot vomit, and the voice, who we haven't mentioned yet, advised the saboteur to say, I have seen a horse vomit.
That reminds me, talking about questions, of something else I meant to say about Don't Unleash the Beast. We were spotting, when we watched through those 3 episodes, how the games are categorised in Don't Unleash the Beast and do attempt to test different skills, different virtues, as Raven might put it, which is a good idea. Don't Unleash the Beast started with a physical challenge, didn't it, like an obstacle course or something. Then a mental challenge, sometimes using the Hallian language. Then what I termed a teamwork challenge, where they have to work together to achieve a goal and show that they're a good team, which is a good idea. Then the final challenge before the end game, the treasure cave, is always the same, the simian tree, where one of them has to be in the harness and jump up and knock off the simian fruit. I did appreciate that categorisation and variety in those first 3 challenges, but there's something else to say in favour of Don't Unleash the Beast. We've touched now on the actors in Trapped. There are a lot of them in Series 4, too many of them because there are too many characters. But throughout the show you get the woman who plays Madame de Visage, Helen Evans, doing little in-game characters. She is actually in all 4 series. She plays Miss Mutternot in Ever After, whom she had also played in another challenge, better challenge, Spooked, about picking library books, and it's one of the ones where books with a certain colour on them are spooked.
Or a certain invertebrate spider or scorpion or whatever.
Very much like Beware the Crowman and Toxic Treats. In that way you can look for patterns and colours as the saboteur and encourage the team to pick the wrong ones. In the first series, Helen Evans played the witch character, demanding ingredients for her brew, and you only had to get 2 of those right to win, or 2 wrong to lose, but it's impossible to identify them. Very much a luck guessing game, that.
Dozens and dozens of jars, and she'll say she wants some sort of seeds, and you go for one of the jars of seed-looking things, and it turns out to be one of the other 10 jars of seed-looking things. No sporting chance for the genuine players there.
Also in all 4 series was Ollie Pike as Wily Sneak, who demonstrated all the games, using his sort of dancing and mime skills, demonstrating them very energetically and amusingly, very enjoyable.
It was funny him doing the games on his own, trying to win them and sabotaging them and being surprised that they'd been sabotaged.
Wall of Sorrow is the one I particularly like. With that, the lights go off, Wily Sneak pushes all the wall down, going, ha ha ha, look what I'm doing. Lights come back on, it's like, oh, he's done that to the wall. All without speaking, of course. Very well done there, Ollie Pike.
Goodness me, the costume they put on him forever after, the fairy tale, what is it supposed to be, Prince or something? Make him look stupid? That's doing him a disservice.
Yes, it's a big detraction from him being an unfortunate trapped 100 years ago. I remember when you found that interview with Ollie Pike saying he'd gone to try out for the part of Wily Sneak, and he thought, well, I'm not going to get this. I'm in the room with a load of 12 and 13-year-old child actors. They don't really want someone like me, but they did want someone like him for what he brought to the part, and they kind of dress him up as a character who's obviously younger than the actor is, but it works really well as a piece of performance art. But then unfortunately, yes, as you say, they turn him into a sort of fairy tale prince later on, which didn't work so well. But the other mainstay, of course, is really the presenter, the caretaker, played in a lot of bodysuit and makeup by Simon Greenall, who did it extremely well and was very entertaining. They gave him silly things to do and say that aren't really very funny sometimes, but that's just a symptom of the time it was made. He did a very good job with what he was given.
We did enjoy him introducing us to Series 2 and saying, "Do you like what I've done with the place?" And we thought, "Oh my God, what have they done to the set? How have they ruined it?" And then he goes, "Absolutely nothing." And we're like, "Oh, thank goodness, it was subversion. They've kept it the same." How ironic that they did totally change the sets and pretty much ruin it for Trapped Ever After.
That's right, even the caretaker's room at the top of the tower is all full of ivy and things in Ever After to make it look more fairy tale-y. Should have stuck with doing nothing to the place. What a shame. He's one of those hosts that doesn't get to interact with or even be filming at the same time as the contestants. So is Wiley Sneak, really, which is a bit of a shame how they put these shows together. You do miss out on that host-contestant interaction, which Don't Unleash the Beast managed to include, which Raven has in abundance, certainly in its first few series, and could have in abundance throughout, but misses the opportunity to use. So that was something that I thought was a bit of a shame about Trapped, but it is quite effective the way they marry all the bits of filming in different places at different times together, make it look like the caretaker's winching the unfortunates up the tower while he tells us amusing but made up facts about them, like they collect cheese sandwiches. Wiley Sneak's brought them all in the boat. Well, not really. But really interacting with the contestants, at least at times, is the voice.
She certainly has done a lot of separate speaking, just general floor 6. How do you feel about being trapped?
Anything where you can see her mouth is a dead giveaway. But of course the voice in the first series, Eve Kopp, is much better than the voice in series 2, 3 and 4, Faith Brown.
Yes, again, it's not really Faith Brown's fault. It's probably the way she's directed that gets her actually to do it wrong, to overdo it, to shout and screech too much. The original voice would just say things in an unnerving, slightly evil, but perfectly level kind of voice. Also, they make her up better with this badly done makeup, the white powder. It looks like powder and it's stuck into her imperfections in her skin, and she's got the purple lipstick on her teeth.
Series 1 is the best in many ways. There's a purity to it that is missing later on, and that's something that's certainly true of Raven, which we'll talk about pretty soon. I just wonder if there are any other games we should mention before we move on. I like from Series 1, which they only played twice, Deadly Medley, where they have to spell out the words using the letters that are musical notes. I remember enjoying some of the voice over there. Boris will hate that word.
It had 2 D's or whichever letter it was, didn't it? And you have to spell out a word with a certain letter in it.
Yeah, I like that one. And as you mentioned, Phyllis and Madge is really better than Madame de Visage. And you've got some classics that make it through to Series 3, like Wall of Sorrow and Snake Attack and Wicked Wardrobes.
That's a game format where you have to all do something, such as plug up the sewer holes, turn on the lights, that's Wicked Wardrobes, or turn off the alarm clocks, all go and hide, then the saboteur comes out and just undoes everything. And that one's really all about timing. Have you left only just enough time for everyone to finish turning the lights back on and the alarm clocks back off or whatever?
That one with the alarm clocks is Sleep Creepers, and it's much tougher on the saboteur than Wicked Wardrobes because the saboteur's duvet always gets completely messed up. You have to keep getting in and out of bed, so it's obvious who it is. Whereas if you get in and out of the wardrobe remains unruffled and undamaged.
And if you were playing for your life, sort of in practical terms, you might just as well wait for the last 5 seconds of the game, but of course that wouldn't make good television, so it's not allowed.
So really, it's genuinely fun and entertaining for the contestants and for the viewers. I remember that Freaky Factory. That's another very entertaining challenge from Series 1 to 3, where the voice encourages the boy to get on the floor and steal the egg boxes, and he and the other boy end up having this tug of war over an egg box, and they're both absolutely giggling. Of course, that boy knows who the saboteur was because they've just had a tug of war. Raven also aired on children's BBC. It had 10 series originally from 2002 to 2010, as well as 3 what were termed spin-off series during that time, with a slightly different format in slightly different places. And then it returned, as I alluded to earlier, in 2017 and 18 with a kind of revival. But it was a fun and interesting and well worthwhile thing to do in the early 21st century, coming up with Raven and bothering to organise it and go up to Scotland and film it, despite the best efforts of the weather to wash them all out on occasion. Way back in December 2002, not everybody had the CBBC channel. It didn't come as standard, and there was still a lot of children's BBC on BBC One and BBC Two. And a stage that happened not too long after that, in the decline of children's television as a thing, and scheduled television as a thing, is that CBBC moved completely to the CBBC channel. And, well, they haven't killed the CBBC channel and CBeebies quite yet, have they?
No, they're showing Bluey on CBBC at the moment, which I think is their greatest asset. Some teenage kids were walking past a room I was doing some tutoring in a school, talking about Bluey.
It certainly has some very good episodes. But yeah, back then, at the end of 2002, not everybody could get the CBBC channel, and we were lucky enough at the time to have a cable TV package that had CBBC channel on it. So we watched Raven originally, late 2002, early 2003, in that very pure, unadulterated, unchanged, very appealing first series. And how we enjoyed James Mackenzie in the role of Raven, bringing so much fun and cheeky interaction to the show as he ad-libbed his way through all the challenges with the Warriors, and what a wonderful job he did there. But really the look and feel, despite any sort of early imperfections, which inevitably will happen, of the first series, really are very special, aren't they?
Yes, they made a lot of changes after the first series. I suppose they did iron out a few creases, but I think I enjoyed the first series the most. They certainly got more right than wrong.
I remember you talking about the Warriors with their sort of Hessian tunics, looking like warriors, not too neat and clean, with their huge bold colour schemes and emblems.
That's right, they had warrior colours, and they were sort of beige and light grey and dark grey and brown. You couldn't really tell which was which, but I suppose it didn't matter. They weren't a big part of the show, whereas those emblems got bigged up much too much in the end.
And those standards in the first series, they're all sort of different shapes, made of all gnarled branches, have a lot of life and character to them. One of them's very bowed in the main bit of the shaft, I remember, whereas later on they're very sort of rigid and obviously made of plastic. Like the Warriors themselves, there's a sort of earthiness and genuineness to that first series. Even the letter stones in the Vale of Dunnan, the Riddle Path, are all sort of higgledy-piggledy scattered around, look like they've been left there by mischievous sprites trying to stop you getting the answer to the riddle and make it very hard for you. Whereas later on with Riddle Bridge, they're all set out very rigidly in columns and rows and have obviously been put there by the BBC production team rather than mischievous sprites. That sort of atmosphere and world building, very effective early on there.
And goodness me, what they don't need and what they did better without was effects. Blooming computer effects, making portals, making things flash and explode for no reason. Just being in the woods with their standards and their knapsacks and James Mackenzie was brilliant.
The freedom they gave James Mackenzie there to put a lot of himself into Raven the character and to chat and laugh with the Warriors was brilliant too, and that got pared back and pared back and pared back until he became extremely robotic in the last few series, sort of 8, 9 and 10. A great waste of James Mackenzie and his talents there.
His lines were 99% scripted, and not only that, they were scripted badly by a generation of writers who left school with the impression that if you want to write well, all you have to do is look up your words in the thesaurus and change them to the longest word.
So as you've probably gathered there, I think we both felt that Raven went downhill a lot as it went on and developed. Having said that, we did always watch it and enjoy some things about it, enjoy some of the challenges, enjoy some of the warriors. Some of them were very entertaining to watch because of their personalities, because of their skills, because of a mixture of both, hopefully. And it was always good to see, Raven's coming back for those reasons. Thinking of the first series, watching it over those Christmas holidays at the end of 2002, beginning 2003, I was 19 years old. I got a kind of a feeling that I hadn't had for a long time, being immersed in this fantasy world and really excited to see the new episodes. Kind of like the feeling I used to get for Nightmare. Obviously, I had it much stronger for Nightmare, but I did have it for Raven too, on a kind of smaller scale and being older and less kind of full of awe and wonder. But it was a very special feeling and a very special experience getting into Raven. An unexpected one too, which is always a bonus. And after we recorded our previous podcast, you were saying how you had something similar with Danny Phantom.
Yes, I wrote about how Danny Phantom made me feel when I was 19 on my Extreme Ghostbusters website. And when you read that, you said that's exactly how I felt about Raven at the exact same age. And it did have that comparison, being inspired to watch it by seeing similarities to our respective favourite things, in my case, Extreme Ghostbusters. And that was very interesting that we'd had that basic same experience at the same age.
And speaking of Nightmare, it's quite a hot topic of debate in places, just how similar Nightmare and Raven are. They are both medieval fantasy children's game shows. The way that the games are played is mostly quite different, but in feel and presentation, there are quite a few similarities, aren't there?
I think Raven and Traegard are very comparable because they're the medieval character host, both played extremely well, both go through character changes, whether for better or worse or neither, sort of in opposite ways, because Raven starts out your friend and your ally and helping you along and then gets very kind of aloof, whereas Traegard starts out as impartial. However much Hugo Myatt gets into it and wants to help the team, the character's impartial, and then around halfway through he's the leader of the powers that be and wanting the teams to win.
And ironically, both characters' hosts are changed by the introduction of an evil force to work against. By a big baddie, Navar and Raven, Lord Fear and Nightmare. But yeah, as you say, it kind of changes the characters in opposite ways, even though it's having the effect on both of them of taking them away from their impartiality and towards the role of I'm the main goodie and I must fight this evil, which in both ways I think is kind of a shame for the host character, for their interactions with the game players and for their interactions with the audience.
There are also some sort of coincidences. The first warrior on Raven to go out does so by making a mistake that no one would ever make again, volunteering for Way of the Warrior twice. That's rather like only picking up one object in Nightmare, or dispelling your first spell instead of attacking the guard with the second spell. There are a lot of creases that get ironed out for Series 2 and 3, whether for the better or not, after multiple watches, maybe losing some of the purity along with the ironing. And then Series 4 goes through a lot of changes, and we didn't experience this with Nightmare being so young and not really noticing so much, but with Raven we went, ooh, not sure about this, not sure about this total change of the last stand, from something where your lives actually count to just a run the risk kind of final race.
They've got 9 lives now instead of 7. We're never going to see someone run out of lives and have to leave. Of course, they never really wanted that to happen and manipulated something in Series 3 so that it wouldn't happen.
And subsequent Series 2 at least once I can think of. But in Series 1, I truly believe it had the potential to happen. That's another thing that's pure and right about Series 1. It never did happen, so I can't prove it. But Way of the Warrior wasn't a saving yourself challenge. Someone would just attempt it to try and win an extra life, and if a warrior had got lost along the way, they'd just not send home the last place warrior at the end. They'd say, oh well, that one's gone. See the rest of you tomorrow. tomorrow.
And we know you're right about that because there is an example in Series 1 where it really could have happened and it would have had to happen in a round of Longstaff. There's this warrior who I think was called Boyan. If he'd come off the Longstaff thing, he'd have been out. He'd have lost his last life, and that would have had to have been, right, you're going home now, and the rest of us are off the way of the warrior. There was no way they had manipulated that Longstaff bout. I think it definitely could have gone either way. That's the closest we ever came, of course, in that first series, before it was over-ironed, to someone actually losing all their lives and going out. And what a shame in many ways that it didn't actually happen. But Boyan did win that round of Longstaff, and I'm sure the crew breathed a huge sigh of relief when he did so.
Another similarity with Nightmare is when it gets to Series 8, it changes so much that it makes you go, oh my god, what have they done? They've ruined it. With Raven, it was that change of location, mainly.
What a shame they couldn't use Castle Toward anymore, which they used from Series 1 to 7. It's not that they wanted to move, it's just that it wasn't possible anymore, and they took it to a different outdoor activity centre, but it didn't have the castle ruins, and so it didn't feel right. And as you said, tuning into Series 8 and seeing Raven presenting it, it's like, well, what's this medieval Birdman doing at this outdoor activity centre in Aviemore? Being rather out of place is the answer to that.
And then these kids who they got for those series, they just had to be quite adept and confident at swimming, whitewater rafting, jumping off high trees, and the opportunity to get people on who wanted to face their fears and grow as people and digivolve, as it were, was gone. You just had to get kids who wanted to come along and have an adventure weekend like they might do with their families any day of the week and not grow and learn.
Yeah, thinking about those early challenges, the swimming stuff, Leap of Faith, Longstaff, the flower throwing game, Forest of Chains, Blasted Mountain. It's all stuff that anyone can have a go at. And it does test different virtues, different skills, different fears, and was obviously a very challenging and character building experience for the warriors. And that's why it's great fun to be a viewer as well and get into it with them. Whereas in Series 8 to 10, if you're watching these very proficient young people who like going whitewater rafting and things, just doing that, it's not the same thing at all. And Series 1 also had the right amount of brain work as well, with the old troll riddle, which in weeks 2 and 3 nobody got because they were so stupid, and the riddle path at the Vale of Dunnan, as I mentioned, and at the end of the week you had to solve the riddle of the portal. And for the only time in Series 1, the Ultimate Warrior was decided with a bit of brain work. Llama picking up the correct bowl that was the true Raven's Eye. It's all on the blooming obstacle course after that, even in Series 2 and 3, where it's a better, as you were mentioning, a better last stand. It's still all on the physical stuff there. Not that they don't have any brain work later on, although Riddle Path isn't featured very much in Series 10, is it? Only in the final, I think.
Of course, there's Demon Square, true or false questions. Now that's comparable to Nightmare, isn't it?
That's a very good challenge, which makes it through from Series 2 to 10, because it is such an important mainstay. And indeed, it's in Series 11 and 12, the reboot as well, with a slightly different name that I can't remember now, but I think it was good to include it there. The trouble is, as we get to sort of 8, 9 and 10, the questions are these obscure facts that they're just going to have to guess, so it's not really a very good brain work test at all. It's just pick one or the other, 50-50 chance, and are you going to be brave enough not to follow and make your own decision? I mean, it's pointless to make your own decision when you've got absolutely no chance of actually knowing it or taking an educated guess.
I suppose it's equally pointless to follow. You've all just got a 50-50 chance. So, yeah, that was another way that they ruined it.
Of course, on Trapped, it was appropriate to have these obscure facts as true and false questions in order to give the saboteur a fighting chance to successfully sabotage the game so as not to make it unfair on a particular player and also to make it interesting for the audience. Whereas in Raven, your brain work challenges are purely there to test the warrior's brain work. I liked the challenge called Dark Path in series 2 to 4, feeling your way around the trailing vines, doing something different, challenging there, a blindfolded challenge. I think that worked very well. But obviously there was great variety in how entertaining the challenges were to watch. And as you say, once you get to Series 8, it's really do this bit of whitewater rafting, do this bit of abseiling, and it has nothing to do with the medieval birdman who's telling you to do it. And they still have somewhat mitigated versions of Leap of Faith and Longstaff and things like that, but it really isn't the same. Whereas, right up to Series 7, when we're doing things round Castle Tower, and they're nicely medieval fantasy themed, Dead Man's Vault, Torture Chamber, accuracy games like Burning Battlements and Fire Water, they all seem to sit very nicely with the Raven premise and the Raven character and the Raven environment. So yeah, basically, once you get to Series 4, it starts a bit of a downhill slope, and when you get to Series 8, they completely ruin it.
Now, you mentioned the spin-offs, so we'd better talk about them. Goodness me, they weren't nearly as good, any of them. Like the main series, I think there was a certain amount of purity and things right with the first spin-off, Raven the Island. It did have some creases, but then it was over-ironed for subsequent spin-offs. A very notable difference between it and the main series, which actually I think there should always be with the spin-off, otherwise you might as well just be making the main show, was that the warriors were in teams and it was team challenges. And a good thing about Raven the Island was that these teams were encouraged to play to their strengths. Send one warrior in to do the swimming if he or she was the best swimmer, for instance. Get one warrior or two warriors to do the climbing if they were the best climbers, and the other two in the team weren't much good. Whereas after that, it really got like school. They would divide the tasks evenly between themselves, clearly having been told you have to give everyone a go at everything, like a bloody teacher, even if some of those people didn't want to do it and weren't any good at it.
When I first watched the first episode of Raven the Island, I had an extremely long and tiring day babysitting, and I watched it on video in bed at the end of the day. And it's one of the two occasions in my life where I've genuinely thought, this is so bizarre and stupid, am I actually dreaming? And then realised half a second later, no, I'm not. But it was that strange to me and different from the real show, and I thought rather poorly conceived that I did seriously wonder, does this actually exist? It shouldn't. It's the sort of stupid thing I might dream about, but in this case, unfortunately, it's actually real. And yet, as you say, it is the best of the three spin-offs. They were very proud of being able to film the second one, The Secret Temple, in India, which was obviously a big undertaking. And then apparently there were plans to film the third one, The Dragon's Eye, in Canada. And that just so happened to be the exact time when the BBC ran out of money and it was the recession, so they ended up filming it in Scotland instead.
One crease that I do agree needed ironing out was that if one warrior touched a rope during some sort of Thrall Demons challenge or something, they could be brought back. I do think that the price was too high, like about 8 of the gems that you've been working so hard to get, and largely because the price was so high, I think it caused a lot of friction and a lot of arguments about whether it was worth bringing people back, and you don't want to see that, the kids all bickering, hating each other, not wanting to work as a team anymore.
Shades of the Crystal Maze there, and sometimes we say when we're watching the Crystal Maze, actually a whole crystal, 5 seconds of time, is a big price to buy someone out. Secret Temple and the Dragon's Eye, a similarly high price that may well not actually be worth it overall for the team and their eventual potential success, and the decision should be thought about very carefully.
I don't think any series had the correct method of choosing the leader. In the island, someone was just chosen by somebody upstairs. You're the leader of the wolves, you're the leader of the eagles, etc. And there was one bad choice, and I don't mean that the wolf leader wasn't a good leader because she couldn't jump into the pool and pick up a magic pearl or whatever it was. She just wasn't a good leader, and lots of people aren't good leaders. Lots of people are better followers followers and still people you'd want on your team. But I think it was largely because of her chickening out of the challenges that someone decided we need to have leadership challenges. We need to get them to walk along planks and fill up tubes with water to see who'll be the best leader. But that doesn't work either. What probably should have happened is that the team would elect a leader, see who they most trusted to lead them. Another thing I liked about Raven the Island was that more than one person could win. They were supposed to be working together to achieve this goal of finding this magic acorn, and 3 of them got there, so 3 of them won. But then after that, somebody like Claire Feeble came along saying, no, you have to have one winner and they're to be better than everybody else. And they would pick people off in the last week, and in the secret temple particularly. It's very memorable how unfair that is. Choose a basket at random and see if it's got the cobra in it. And the best warrior, who also happened to be a very excellent leader, so excellent that while someone else was leader, he did what she said and got along with her until she was eliminated. He was also very good at all the challenges that weren't just purely 100% luck-based, and he picked the blooming cobra and got eliminated, and everyone was fuming.
That was Taylan, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it was absolutely rage-inducing for that reason. And also, it was so jarringly at odds with this story that was supposed to be going alongside the warriors on their quest. You get all this Raven and the co-hosts doing the plot, which never really matches up with the challenges. And then when you get the warriors in the video diary saying, oh, someone had to go here, and I guess it was Taylan, that's jarringly bringing us back down to earth. Someone had to go here because it's a TV show.
It was also quite jarring when someone was walking over some planks or something, and one of them was a deliberate trap to eliminate a contestant, and they made the other kids say to each other, oh, well, she should have listened to us, and she should have done this, and she should have done that. She had no chance. So they were damned if they did, and they were damned if they didn't try to justify those traps, those luck-based eliminations, because it's unjustifiable.
All 3 of those spin-offs had a co-host, as well as Raven himself in the series. The island had Princess Erina, who was more of a main host, and Raven wasn't in it so much as her. And then in the Secret Temple and Dragon's Eye, Raven was in every episode, but he had Saturani alongside him in the Secret Temple, and Irvan in the Dragon's Eye, and they were trying to do a sort of saboteur, traitor storyline with him that really didn't work and really didn't match up with the challenges and was absolutely cringe. But certainly all 3 of those characters added a different feel to the spin-offs. It's a good idea to have them there as well as Raven, if we're going to say it's a slightly different thing.
Again, I think the original is the best. I think Princess Erina fits in seamlessly with all that mythos, Scottish medieval fantasy stuff. She looks the part, she sounds the part. She's a fantasy warrior princess kind of character. She's got this wisp that she talks to about the warriors called Harriad, which fits in with that Celtic folklore they're trying to evoke.
So props to Lindsay Mackenzie within this podcast. I think she certainly deserves that.
Saturani, I can't even remember who she was supposed to be. I do remember her getting a bit arsey with the warriors. Again, not the fault of the actor, it was the character, the way she was written and directed, but she seemed to be someone who wasn't sure if she wanted the warriors helping her, and she would get a bit snippy if they weren't living up to her expectations. And then Irvan, as you said, that doesn't really work in that context, the traitor thing, and it was very jarring, to use that word again, when some of the challenges they were doing was ostensibly the character wasting time so they wouldn't be able to complete their mission. But then they used the results of those challenges anyway to carry on with the competition.
So what we've ended up there with really is quite a harsh critical analysis of Raven. The reason being I think we did enjoy it quite a lot and would like to have enjoyed it more, and those are the very clear ways that we could have enjoyed it more and should have been able to enjoy it more, quite frankly. So that's why they stick with us and have come out on this podcast. So, thanks for listening to all our thoughts about these 21st century children's game shows. Next time we'll be staying with the game show theme as we examine some adult game shows. Again, by adult I don't really mean X-rated. It's not going to be Swedish Blind Date and Naked Jungle. It's going to be some game show mainstays from the 20th and 21st centuries that are always go-to points of reference and have provided us with entertainment and enjoyment over the years and over the decades. Until then, good night out there.
Whatever you are.